And there we are. You'll need to click got it to agree to the recording. And I will present all questions at the end for each of the ballot issues. If you could try and put the number or letter of the issues at the beginning of your question, I'd really appreciate it, because I think that will make it easier to make sure that I get the right question for the right ballot and the right speaker. All right, I'll hand it over now to Kathy to begin, and I'll see you all later in the hour.
Thank you, Perlan. It's a pleasure to be here tonight. This is part of our annual programs, and tonight's program and next Tuesday's night program have been brought to you by Voter Services. We have programs once a month on the third Tuesday, typically at 5:30, except for October, where we're doing it on the first and second week so that you have time for your ballots. Typically, these are on Zoom at 5:30 on the third Tuesday, and we encourage you to look at our website to see the programs. Next month in November, we'll be joined by Elizabeth Garner, the Colorado State Demographer. I'd like to now thank Voter Services for the work that they have done to put together tonight's program, highly informative program. I'd like to introduce to you, excuse me, Jeanette Scotland, who is co-chair with Ann Duncan. One of the functions of Voter Services is to research and write up the pros and cons of local ballot issues for each election. So I'll turn it over to Jeanette Scotland. Thank you.
Thank you, Kathy. It's a great honor to be here to be presenting on the pros and cons. We have a committee that was headed by Bobby Heisterkamp, and she worked very hard to make sure people got all the research done and organized. And so she also is capable of making a PowerPoint presentation for us to read. We are doing something a little different this time. Rather than having one person deliver all the issues and pros and cons, each person who did the research is who was able to be here tonight is doing the presentation of their issue. So what they're going to be doing is reading what the major points are of the legislation, which is in the PowerPoint presentation. And then they're going to be reading from our great pros and cons pamphlet, the pros and the cons, if they exist. One thing I want to point out is that the office manager, Fran Coleman, has helped us to find a really good translator. So we're going to be translating the pros and cons into Spanish. And once we get the final copy, we're going to see if Parks and Rec will approve it so we can distribute it to all the parks and recs around the city. So having said that, I'm going to turn this over to Bobby, and Bobby is going to begin the PowerPoint presentation. Is that right, Bobby? Okay.
Okay. Can everybody see the beginning of the ballot issues presentation? And I know that the gallery, if you're doing it with the gallery, you can move the gallery over a little if it's covering up part of your right. No, you can't. Never mind. It popped back on me. Let me see if I can move. I know it's covering. It should not cover anything important. No, I can't. Okay. I can't change that. So, but everything that is on the slides will be said in verbally. So please don't worry if you can't see that part. Okay, so we're going to talk about ballot issues. Now, there are so many of them. There are 13 this year that we're going to do them in two sessions. And today we're going to start. Well, let me start with what we're talking about on the ballot. There are two ways that things kick in on the ballot. One is it can be put on the ballot by Denver City Council. And then it's called a referendum, or it is referred by, in other words, by the Denver City Council. And the City Council would like the citizens to vote on that particular issue. An initiative is another way to get something on the ballot, and that can be proposed by a citizen who gathers the required number of valid signatures. And right now, the required number for this year was 9,184. And as you all know, they gather quite a few more than that because some of the signatures get thrown out. And so they have to make sure they have the 9,184 valid ones. And we're going to start with an initiated ordinance. And Carol Biden did the work on this, but she's not here tonight. So I'm going to turn it over to Ann Duncan, who's going to describe it and for you. Go ahead, Ann.
Okay, thanks, Bobby. As Bobby said, I did not do the research on this. However, I did some research on it. So I'm not completely ignorant of it. This is initiated Ordinance 300. It's the Pandemic Research Fund. It's an amendment to the Denver Revised Code. It's an ordinance increasing the retail marijuana sales tax by 1.5% and dedicating the revenue derived by the tax increase to fund pandemic research for public protection, preparedness, and recovery. The major provisions are: it provides for a 1.5% sales tax increase on retail marijuana, and this is recreational marijuana, not medical. That's 15 cents on a $10 purchase. The money raised will go to pandemic research for advanced technologies to protect the public from the spread of pathogens, research for pandemic preparedness and recovery. Funds will be dedicated to the University of Colorado, Denver City Center, and they do work with the city on a regular basis. 75% of funds will go to research on personal protection equipment, disinfection and sterilization technologies, and design features of physical spaces. 25% will go to researching public policy and planning. Those in favor say the next pandemic shouldn't catch us off guard. Funding for future pandemic preparedness at all levels of government is currently at about the same level as it was before COVID-19. The idea that money is available for preparedness research is a myth. Research on prevention and mitigation of future pandemics will help Denver to avoid the level of both suffering and economic damage caused by COVID-19. Preparation will help Denver to take charge of preparation for schools, hospitals, restaurants, and small businesses. Those opposed say less than 25% of funds will be for public policy and planning research. This is an improper use of local tax revenues and should be done at the state and national levels. The University of Colorado did not initiate nor endorse this proposal. Denver's government already received funding to combat current and future pandemics. The proponents are the Denver Pandemic Fund, and the opponents, unsurprisingly, are the marijuana industry group.
Thank you.
Yep.
We will now go on to 301, and Diane Young will be talking about this issue. She has done the research on it. And remember, if you have questions, be sure to type them into the chat room. This one has a lot of complicating things, but I think Diane is going to keep us all focused on what is most important. Go ahead, Diane.
Okay, first of all, I would just like to say both 301 and 302 are related to the same piece of property, which is currently the Park Hill Golf Course property located at 35th and Colorado. The land was owned by the Clayton Foundation and was sold to Westside Investment Partners in 2019, which brought up a couple of ballot issues from two different points of view. 301 is going to prohibit the following without approval of the voters in a regular election, which is any commercial or residential development on land designated as a city park or protected by city-owned conservation easement, except where consistent with park purposes, conservation easement purposes, or cultural facilities, and any partial or complete cancellation of 1997 city-owned conservation easement, unless for the purpose of creating a park. Basically, it's saying the voters have to approve. The major provisions is pretty straightforward. It would amend the Denver Municipal Code under the Parks and Rec, which would change the code so that the city administration and city council would no longer have the final say in removing a city-owned conservation easement. It would give Denver voters the opportunity to vote to end such an easement. So those in favor say this citizen-initiated measure would help protect our parks and open space from unchecked development. The Park Hill Golf Course land is currently protected by a city-owned conservation easement, which Denver voters approved and paid for specifically to protect the green space from development. Now developer wants to eliminate the easement to turn the space into concrete. As Denver grows, we need to preserve and protect our green spaces as they provide health and environmental benefits to the surrounding community. Under the conservation easement, the Park Hill green space can be used for recreational activities such as youth athletic fields, walking trails, running track, and an urban garden. None of this will happen if the developer is allowed to have the conservation easement removed. Denver's past visionary leaders committed to create a city within a park and increase pollution and climate change affect our health and well-being. That vision is in jeopardy. Denver is growing and neighborhoods are becoming denser with multifamily housing and commercial buildings. People need respite from noise, pollution, scorching streets, and protecting our parks and green space makes it more important. This confusing and so those opposed say this confusing and misleading initiative is not about park space and in fact only applies to the privately owned Park Hill Golf Course. This is an attempt to allow the city to veto the will of the diverse and historically disenfranchised group surrounding the Park Hill. If this initiative passes, Northeast Park Hill's voice will be silenced and the land will remain a golf course, which is what the current easement allows. It will prevent the land from serving the community with a public park, affordable housing, and a needed grocery store. While there are important public health benefits to open space, there are equally critical health benefits to affordable housing, access to fresh foods, and job opportunities, all of which lead local residents have said they want for this land in a recent city survey. This is a direct attempt to make a local issue into a citywide issue at the expense of a diverse community. The passage of this initiative would set a dangerous precedent against local control for future planning processes by allowing a citywide vote to determine what happens in a local community. The proponents are a group called Save Open Space Denver. The opponents are a group called Empower Northeast Denver Campaign.
Thank you, Diane. Now we'll go on to 302, which Diane also did the research for. Go ahead.
Okay, so this is similar, but the first part is the most important. And that is that it would amend the definition of a conservation easement to apply only to those which have been reviewed and approved by the Colorado Division of Conservation and for which income tax credit certification has been issued by the department. It would but the second and third part are similar to 301. It would require voter approval before the city allows any residential, commercial, or construction on a city park or land and city park protected by a city-owned conservation easement, with the exception for limited construction related to recreation use. It would require voter approval to extinguish a city-owned conservation easement. So the provisions are, this proposed measure is similar to ballot number 301 in that it would require voter approval for construction on city park land or property, or to extinguish a city-owned conservation easement. However, section 1 of this proposal defines conservation easement as those which have been approved by the State Division of Conservation. And this, so that it would not apply to the Park Hill property because the easement on that property is a city easement and does not meet the definition of the conservation easements as defined in section 1. Those in favor say there's a defunct golf course in the diverse Northeast Park Hill neighborhood. Local residents and community leaders are working through a process with the city to decide what their neighborhood wants and needs for the property. This initiative ensures that local neighborhood has the power to determine the future of the property. The community lacks affordable housing, a grocery store, and open space, and we should have a say over what happens in our neighborhood and how to use the property to better our community. The initiative protects the voice of Northeast Park Hill by more clearly defining a conservation easement in Denver law. It does not change state conservation easement laws or reduce land protections. A different measure on the ballot this year would give voters across the city veto power over what local residents want for the community on this property. We don't let Cherry Creek residents decide what 5 Points needs and vice versa. City voters should not have veto power over the neighborhood. If this measure does not pass, a dangerous precedent for citywide voters to have veto power over any local neighborhood issue. Our initiative protects local choices and local voices. But those opposed to it say this ballot issue is financed and supported by a real estate developer who wants to tear up existing perpetual conservation easements so they can build mixed-use development on one of the last large pieces of open space that could be acquired for a city park. It's 155-acre Park Hill Golf Course land. This is currently protected from their planned development by a city-owned conservation easement. The developer, Westside Investment Partners, has launched this misleading, deliberately confusing ballot initiative for the sole purpose of undermining the citizen-initiated ordinance number 301. Their proposed measure dishonestly appears to be a protect parks measure by copying the language of proposed initiative 301, but it deceptively includes a poison pill that redefines the term conservation easement under Denver law to exclude conservation easements purchased by city taxpayers for cash with no state income tax credits involved. It's a sleight of hand which would eliminate the voter protection of initiative number 301 for this land and facilitate their plan to pave over the pristine green open space for their profit. This is a citywide issue, and passage of this measure would be a disaster for the environment and Denver citizens and a multi-million-dollar gift to the real estate developer. So just opposite of what was before, the proponents are Empower Northeast Denver campaign, and the opponents are Save Open Space Denver.
Thank you, Diane.
Mm-hmm.
We'll now move on to initiated ordinance 303, which is called Let's Do Better. Sue Stark is the one who worked on this one, and I will turn it over to her. Go ahead, Sue. Sue, are you muted?
There.
There you go. Okay.
So the title of this ordinance reads as follows, that it would entitle require the city of Denver to enforce unauthorized camping, providing a process for private enforcement if the city fails to enforce unauthorized camping, allowing the city to establish up to 4 authorized camping locations on public property where the city must provide running water, restroom facilities, and lighting, and funding such camping locations with city revenues to support the city's homeless population. The major provisions of this ordinance would be any person could file a complaint with the city to enforce camping ordinances. And if the city does not act within 72 hours of that complaint, any person may file a civil lawsuit against the city. It also prohibits camping on private property without the written consent of the owner or the owner's agent. And it allows camping only where the city law already allows camping. If the plaintiff's lawsuit against the city for not enforcement of unauthorized camping prevails, they will be awarded reasonable cost, attorney's fees, and injunctive relief. So those in favor, and I must say that although I requested responses from those in favor, I never received any answer to my requests. And so I take these issues in favor simply from the language of the proposal. So those in favor might say homeless campsites in the area that do not have basic services to accommodate overnight stays pose a public health and safety emergency that affects all Denver residents and businesses. The city needs to establish sites on public property for homeless campsites that have running water, hygiene facilities, and adequate lighting. Such restricted sites can be funded with already increased taxes designated for the homeless, and the city should be held legally responsible for enforcing camping laws. Those opposed include the Colorado Coalition for the Homeless and other social service organizations that address homelessness. They say, those opposed say, this initiative does not provide a solution to homelessness. It would set up an adversarial relationship between property owners and vulnerable citizens. It would take discretion away from police, diverting their ability to respond to violent or significant property crimes, in that it would require a response within 72 hours to complaints about people camping in unauthorized areas. Those opposed also want to remind us that in July, the city increased its efforts to enforce camping violations by creating the uniform civilian street enforcement team. The cost of fighting civil lawsuits brought under this initiative would be very costly to Denver taxpayers, lessening the ability to fund housing solutions. Temporary solutions such as establishing 4 camping sites on public land do not reduce the numbers of unhoused people. Sanctioned camps on public property proposed under this measure would likely separate people in need of emergency outdoor shelter from their current communities and the services they need for survival and to find permanent housing. Helping people access safe, affordable housing, job opportunities, and healthcare are key to reducing homelessness.
Thank you. We'll move on now to initiated Ordinance 304. And this will be an amendment to the Denver Revised Municipal Code called Enough Taxes Already. We have Sally Ogden who did the research on this, so I'm going to turn it over to Sally.
Thanks, Bobby. Initiative Ordinance 304 is pretty straightforward, actually. Requires reducing total sales and use taxes in Denver from the current 4.81% to 4.5%, starting, I think, immediately.
I think it's January 1st.
January 1st. Well, it's pretty close.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Really, the critical element of this is the provision that if in a future election, the voters of the city and county of Denver pass an additional sales and use tax that exceeds the aggregate 4.5% total, the city must adjust the existing tax levy to comply with the 4.5 total aggregate. So it has future implications. Those in favor say, actually, the only thing I could find, Garrett Flicker was the sponsor of this ordinance. And he was quoted in the Denverite as saying that this proposal would provide some economic relief from regressive taxes for residents who need it the most. The opponents say that this would be an immediate cut of up to $80 million from the city's budget. Sales taxes comprise about 80% of Denver's general fund. And the general fund comprises about 37% to 50% of Denver's taxes that they take in. The opponents say that this initiative would harm Denver's ability to fund road repairs, park maintenance, public safety, and fire protection. It would reduce funding for dedicated programs for homelessness, mental health, preschool, and college affordability. Would mean fewer kids being helped by our nationally recognized Denver preschool program. The opponents are No 304 Denver. The proponents, there is an organization called Enough Taxes Already, and that's where the funding has landed. But that funding is from Defend Colorado, which is a PAC, dark money PAC that nobody knows where it comes from. So, and they actually funded simply getting the initiative on the ballot.
Thank you, Sally. Now I'm going to skip ahead. This is partly this PowerPoint has things in it that we'll be discussing on the 12th. So please close your eyes for a minute so you don't get dizzy. Now we're going to discuss referred measure 2G. Now referred, remember, means it came from the city council, and it will be an amendment to the charter of the city and county of Denver, the charter, not the municipal ordinances. And Jeanette did the work on this one. It was quite a challenge, and she did a very good job on it. I would like to turn it over to Jeanette.
Thank you, Bobby. Okay, the title of this measure is called, "Shall the Charter of the City and County of Denver be amended to allow the Citizen Oversight Board to appoint the independent monitor with consent of the City Council, providing the office of the monitor with independent legal counsel, and establishing employment status of employees." The independent monitor was set up in 2004 along with the Citizen Oversight Board. So this the major provisions of this issue are: the Citizen Oversight Board will appoint the independent monitor with City Council approval, and any appointee will serve as monitor in the interim. There has been no monitor for about 8 or 9 months. This Citizen Oversight Board may remove the office of the independent monitor with City Council consultation. The Office of Independent Monitor may hire and fund an independent attorney to provide legal advice. the Office of the Independent Monitor may hire 2 employees who will be civil service employees and serve at the monitor's will. So those in favor, which were the city council members, and many of the issues came from a task force that was created in 2020. Currently, the Civilian Oversight Board lacks sufficient authority to compel the departments to provide evidence for their investigations, nor to enforce its recommendations for disciplinary actions of the departments. Having another issue is having a body that is different from the one that is appointing the city heads of law enforcement. Appointing them their watchdog is crucial for public trust. And the third pro is career service employees get certain process guarantees for human resource matters such as hiring, firing, disciplinary, and grievance issues. And as I said, the proponents of this were the city council members, and they took some of the issues from the report of the task force. There are the people that are opposed to this.
Thank you. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, I just said you're welcome.
Oh, okay. I don't want to cut you off. Okay. The next one we will discuss, and this is the last one for this evening, is referred measure 2H, which is an election day change, which is an amendment to the charter again of the city and county of Denver. And Liz Brown did the research on this, and she will discuss it. Go ahead, Liz. Liz, are you muted? Is Liz here?
Now I am. Am I
Oh,
now?
thank you. Yeah, thank you very much.
I was afraid to push too many buttons. Yes, election day change. This is refreshingly uncomplicated, I think. The title is Shall the Voters of the City and County of Denver Move Denver's Municipal Elections from May to April to address federal guidelines for mailing ballots to military and overseas voters and elect officials by a majority of votes cast. The major provision, I guess, this would move the municipal election from the first Tuesday in May to the first Tuesday in April of odd numbered years to resolve timing conflicts. The federal guidelines want there to be 45 days from the time of mailing the ballots. So this would resolve that to their military and overseas voters so they can mail them back. Officials would be elected by a majority of votes cast, that is 50% of the votes plus 1 vote cast. So again, this is to make sure that we go along with state guidelines, which are federal guidelines that come about because we have mail-in ballots. This was initiated by the clerk and recorder. And he set up a committee to look at this, a commission. And those in favor are the people who came up with this. And this process included appointing a committee from various parts of Denver, and also to public outreach. They opened it up so people could comment on whatever they thought. So they all seem to be pretty much have a consensus that this should just be moved back to April. And none of the various other things that were suggested. There's no organized opposition to this charter amendment. I don't know if there's any unorganized opposition, but so I think that's all I have to say.
I might
Have I
add,
left-
one thing here that is also in the booklet is there was an attempt to try to change our way of voting to solve this problem. And there were a group of people that wanted to use ranked choice voting instead of, and in fact, that is why that second bullet is there. That ranked choice voting would not necessarily be a majority. It would be the way the ranked choice voting works. And those people were a little bit upset because they thought we could leave it at the first Tuesday in May, as long as we use ranked choice voting, which would mean there would be only one election. It would be solved even if there were 3 or 4 candidates. We would still have, by the definition of ranked choice voting, we'd still have a winner. So it's easy, but it's not so easy if you want to bring in the ranked choice voting option, which is why there were some people who were concerned. Have I?
Well, yeah, I mean, I assumed that was, once they had made the decision and the city council approved it, that's where they were with it.
Yes.
So that's kind of noise.
Well, it was something that was brought up during the discussion, but so that's why there were some people opposed to it, but that's it. Again, it was on a philosophical basis. So, okay, with that, I am thrilled. This went very well. And I now know that there are probably questions. I'm going to open up my chat box and start looking. So Pearl Ann, would you like to start off? And I don't know how you want to do it, but I'm going to turn it over to you.
Okay, thanks, Bobby.
Sure.
We have a couple questions, but not a ton yet. So be sure and put yours in. Maybe you all did such an excellent job explaining them all that there's not questions. The first one is for Diane with the 301, 302. Are there any city easements that are also state conservation easements?
Not in Denver.
Every once in a while, you'll see where somebody with a big ranch or something does get a conservation easement because they can get a tax break, but they can keep it as what they're using it for. But I can't definitively tell you about state conservation easements.
Okay, there's a couple, a comment from Bonnie Clark that election day change gives time for a runoff instead of ranked choice voting. Marty commented that the League of Women Voters of Denver supports ranked choice voting. A question, does 2H eliminate the mayor runoff? So Liz?
No, I don't believe so as I read it. Because the ballots come back from overseas and then they're treated the same way as it is for us voting here. The top 2, there's a runoff of the top 2 of all the ballots.
And there is enough time then, because of the early
The
first
45
election, there's
days
enough time,
added.
yes, to have 2 elections
Right,
and be legal. They'll both be legal.
right.
So interestingly, this is getting the most questions. Here's another one.
Oh,
Right, so much for straightforwardness.
yeah, hey.
I'm confused about moving the election date in 2H to a month earlier and how this helps with mail-in votes. They would need to be sent out the same 45 days ahead. Correct.
Right. And I'm assuming that they have figured out that this will get them back so they can get them back out again, right? You're concerned about that second ballot.
I think
What
it
you're thinking
provides
about.
more turnaround time for the voter services employees to get that done. The previous date in May led to a real crunch in their being able to really do this correctly. And I think they wanted that extra month's time to be able to be sure that they're doing this correctly. It gives them more time. And we weren't, I think we weren't complying with federal standards. Is that not true,
Yes.
Bobby and Elizabeth?
Right, yeah, this also addresses that.
Yeah,
And conflict between municipal law and state law
yes.
as well.
And in some calendar years, there are fewer than 45 days before the general election and a runoff.
Right.
So we were absolutely not in compliance with federal standards.
Okay, we have one for 303, but another one for 2H. So I'll do that first, right? And if 2H is approved, does the last point then preclude ranked choice voting in all municipal elections? So does this negate that going forward?
No, wait a minute, say that again.
Sure. If 2H is approved, does the last point then preclude ranked choice voting in all municipal elections?
But I thought this,
I think it's a question.
that's
Is
not
this-
answered.
Is this going to preclude municipal or ranked choice voting?
Well, as I understand it, it does do that.
It does for now. Now, of course, if
Right.
you could bring it up again, it could be another measure on the ballot, which would bring it up again. But for now,
Right.
you're absolutely
For now,
right.
it's-
Liz. For now,
it's-
it's not going to happen.
If you bring it up, if later, then do you have to have a higher percentage of a vote on it to change it?
No. Not necessarily. No, it would just be a majority.
Okay.
Okay, so there's a question for 301, which is, or I'm sorry, 303. Sue, what do proponents of 303 mean by private enforcement of tent laws? Is it vigilantism? Oh my gosh, I can't speak tonight, sorry.
So be aware, all of you, that when we write up these pros and cons, we are not allowed to put in our own opinions. And this will kind of verge on a little bit of my own opinion. I think what they say is that any citizen can bring a lawsuit against the city if the city does not send somebody out, police presumably, to move people living in tents or temporary shelters off of land when they can file that complaint. And if the city doesn't do that within 72 hours, they can then file a lawsuit against the city for not taking someone from the staff of the police to move people that are camping on property that's disturbing them. I don't know that I don't know that you can call that vigilantism. I think in response, maybe in part response to this, the city did create, I mentioned this, something called the Street Enforcement Team. These are, I think there are only 6 now, and they are 6 uniformed people, but not policemen, who can come out to, who will be in the city, adding more enforcement patrols to unauthorized camping sites. They will be able to issue a sort of citation and encourage people to move. However, they are also trained by the housing authority. So they may also be able to encourage people to seek out services. This street enforcement team, we haven't used it for long enough to see if that is in fact what they can do. I can't really address the issue of vigilantism because I think I would get into my own opinion. Is that okay? Catherine, did that answer what you wanted me to answer?
Yes, she said, yes, thanks.
Okay.
All right, there's a question about our positions on different initiatives. This session, we are just doing voter education and going through our pros and cons. But the league does have position paper on our website, and each one has the decision, why we came to the decision, and what positions we used in those for supporting, opposing, or no position. All right, so there's a question about 302. Diane, if 302 passes, will it override 301?
If 301 and 302 pass, we think it's going to go to the courts because they're kind of opposing. If 301 passes and 302 doesn't, then the voters get to vote. If 302 passes and 301 doesn't pass, then it means that people will only, the conservation easement definitions is changed and it goes back to the city council to decide what happens to the property. So they're kind of opposing views. So if they both pass for some reason, then we believe it'll go to the courts because they're conflicting. And then if neither one of them passed, you're kind of back where you are now, which is you've got Park Hill Golf Course, which has a conservation and you can't really do anything with the land, but keep it as a golf course or open space. Does that answer the question, do you think?
I think it does. Yes, thank you.
Yeah.
That was the last question on the chat. Anyone else want to put some in?
You want, I can add a little bit to my answer.
Sure.
In fact, I was looking this up during the day. Okay, this is per Kevin Flynn. So all elected officials except 2 at-large council members must be elected by a majority of the votes cast. The 2-round runoff system is the only option that guarantees the winner will receive a majority of the vote. 50% plus 1 vote is the majority. In answer to that question a little earlier.
Great,
That's
thank
why
you.
ranked choice was pushed aside.
And again, the League of Women Voters does support ranked choice voting, and Jeanette Scotland wrote in the comments that in a survey collected by Clerk and Recorder on this issue, I wrote a statement supporting ranked choice voting.
As did I. I filled out that same survey.
Great.
I think I read an article that we have more ballot items this year than we have had for a number of years. That's why we're having to break it up into presenting this on 2 nights, because there are so many. And I don't know that there's any rhyme or reason to that, but this is a huge number of ballot issues, especially in an off year. Anybody have any thoughts about that?
I did notice that too. And one of the things, first of all, the initiative process, of course, always allows citizens to who are not disappointed with whatever's going on to initiate their own ballot. There were 3 more, which are still in the background, which will be brought up next year, that did get the number of signatures. I think the pandemic kind of gave people time to sit home and think about what they liked and didn't like about how the city was behaving. Seriously, I think it gave them time to kind of get their emotions, if you want to call it that, to the forefront. So that would be my interpretation. I may be wrong. Go ahead.
Sue,
Mhm.
actually, last year we had 23 ballot issues. Now
But
that was,
that was an on year. This is an
That-
off year.
that's
That's
an
what I'm saying.
on-year
In an
election.
off year, this is a
And
huge number.
11 of
So-
those were state issues.
Yeah.
This year there are,
So if we
there are
had three more,
only
we
three.
had 16, we'd have 19 this year if the others had come forward. But in proposing a question, I overheard some New Era people talking about trying to get a piece of information passed. And they said, well, we're trying to do a ballot issue. And so I questioned this. And they said, oh, no, first, we're really working on a bill through the legislature. But the other person said to me, direct democracy. It's just, if you have an initiative, then you have all the people voting who will vote. That's direct democracy. This was coming from somebody who I'm going to guess was between the ages of 35 and 50. I'm going to take a wild guess. I'm not good at it, but so someone associated with New Era. Now that's not their position. It was just where it came from.
I have heard from the Denver elections people that there is some movement in city council to tighten up the process for qualifying citizen initiatives for the ballot, because it makes for an extremely long ballot. And in my opinion, it's a lot to expect of voters, many of whom are, shall we say, only lightly engaged with the issues.
Well, in
So,
my
Kate-
experience with getting even the people who made the proposal of 303 to not respond to my request saying, please give me your thoughts on why you favor this, made me wonder about the use of the initiative process to toot one's horn or to bring up an issue, but not really intending to make change. So I think we do need to look at this process for initiative, whether or not it's grassroots democracy.
So Katie Brennan in the comments also said several city councilors are working on changes so there would be fewer issues on the ballot. So there's definitely more there.
Go ahead, Marty.
I'd like to. I was trying to put this in chat and I just couldn't word it right. I don't know. We have supported and even initiated ballot issues in the past, but the league has become more concerned about this proliferation of initiated ballot issues and has come up. I think I'd say maybe 5 years ago. I could be totally wrong on the time, saying think before you ink, even signing all these issues around the state, because this has become, a direct democracy is an interesting concept, and we have done that ourselves, but more recently, we have tried to support a representative democracy, that we elect our officials, and if you don't like the decisions they make, re-elect someone else, and I think that often that is and that has been one of the reasons that some of the issues we opposed on our positions this year went back to that very concept of the importance of a representative democracy.
Well,
One of the things you need to keep in mind is that the law changed. You didn't used to be able to pay people who collected signatures.
Right.
And that really changes the idea of direct democracy. It's one thing if you've got enough people to go out and collect signatures who care. It's another if you've got enough people who need a brief shot of income. And it also opens up an incentive to fraud when you're paid by the signature as I understand some of these people are.
And Frank, this is Kay, wouldn't that also end up being that that if you're paying for it, isn't it easier for outside groups to pay for that possibly than individuals? You know?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yes.
Absolutely. And it also, I think, dilutes the really valuable ballot issues that are proposed by organizations and individuals who have a really important, you all know that for me, education, but it just dilutes the whole process and people just get burned out and they vote no on everything.
Right.
Or they don't vote at all.
Look at the ballot.
I've looked at enough of these ballots because I'm an election judge, and I've heard people's comments when they're handing them in or throwing them into the ballot box. And a lot of times they vote for only what they wish to vote for, and the rest of it is just left blank. They just don't. So
Yeah, I think we've had that issue with the voting for judges as well, where people just say, I have no idea, and they're not even going to address this part of the ballot.
Yeah.
That's our mission. The League of Women Voters are supposed to get people informed enough so that when they do make their marks on their ballot, they know what they're doing. Know what you're voting for is my favorite saying. So,
But some people just choose to vote for candidates and leave all the rest of it blank and don't, because it's just more time or energy than they're willing to put forward. And as Sally said, that can, if people are just overwhelmed when that blue book or even our pros and cons brochure arrives by the sheer number of things they're being asked to vote on, that can dilute their attention away from things that we really need our citizenry to look at and make decisions on.
That's why I love the mail-in voting, because I have time to go back and forth, particularly on the judges, because I could never remember. I'd look through what the blue book said, and then you go into your ballot booth. Well, who can remember which ones I shouldn't vote for? I never could, so they all got voted to retain. So it doesn't happen anymore.
good point.
Right.
Good point. The mail-in ballot has been a real, I think, increased the number of voters because they do have their time. They have the time to make their decisions. So, bravo. Are we done? Do we have any more questions? I think
there's no
I
questions.
have a question. I really am confused about why voting to change from May to April will eliminate ranked choice voting. Why is that?
It wouldn't.
It's just not part of
that
it.
has nothing to do with it.
Yeah,
Okay.
that would not. That would
I guess
not.
It's a separate issue.
It's that 50% plus one. And actually you can make an argument that ranked choice does give you 50% plus one, but it's not all first choices necessarily. That's the difference. And having gone to a good many, although not all of those charter change meetings, and there was a whole series of them, Kevin Flynn is definitely not a fan of ranked choice. You could tell all along he was dead set against it. And the other thing is that Paul Lopez did send ranked choice along to City Council as well as moving the May or the May election to April. And City Council chose to choose the simpler option. Ranked choice would save us a lot of money because it costs almost $1 million for that runoff. On the other hand, it would require substantial voter education, which we're willing to do. And we really like the idea, But I think it may be somewhat difficult for people who have been elected under one system to choose to switch to a completely different system. And that may be part of this too, in addition to the fact that Kevin Flynn is dead set against it and was extremely vocal in the Charter Advisory Committee meetings. So.
All right, are we ready to wrap it up? Seem to be at the end. It
Yeah.
was excellent education. I just wanted to point out, I shared my screen with our website. If you go to League of Women Voters of Denver.org and go to voting, ballot issues, it'll bring you to this page. We have all of them here, and also a link to Vote 411, which Anne has worked diligently on. You can go to the League of Women Voters Colorado website, which has their pros and cons, which we'll be talking about next week. And then we have, as I mentioned earlier, the ballot issue positions that the league has taken. And you can print a downloadable version of the pro-con booklet here. So please visit our website and come back next Tuesday, October 12th at 5:30 to look for the next set. And we look forward to seeing you there.
Could I just say one thing about Vote 411? We have gotten, the ballot issues are there. It's our pros and cons. Some candidates have responded, but definitely not the majority at this point. And I'll continue to hound them, but I think they would respond even better to messages from constituents. So if candidates who you would be voting for have not yet responded to our questions, let them know that you'd like to see those responses. That would help. Thanks.
Be sure and look in chat. There's a couple comments there too that people put in through the evening. The last one was from Bonnie Clark. On the monitor, leaving it to the mayor has resulted in long vacancy periods. We do need someone watching police activity. We all agree on that. All right. I think that's it. Anyone else want to finish up?
No.
All right. Thank you.
Pearland. Bye.
Sure. See you next week.
Jerry Cummings is coming next week for the state issues. So
Great.
we've got her.
Thank
She's
you,
great.
everybody, for your effort.